So we need to go over some basics to make sure that everyone's on the same page. When you have a layer, you can open up this transform menu and you have a bunch of properties. Here's where you can make some keyframes. So I've made some keyframes on the position here by clicking on the stopwatch or clicking on this button here to add keyframes at the current time. When you right click on a keyframe, you get a context menu. Here's where you can do things like add hold keyframes or add easy ease. We can view this change in the graph editor by clicking here. We're going to dive into the graph editor in a little bit, so let's close this. Now, we can also look at this if we go to our keyframe velocity. Easy ease is 33.333333%. A linear keyframe like this is going to be 0%. Technically 0.01%, but who's counting? Now there's other things in here like hold keyframes and rove across time. Now these keyframes are a little more specialty. Hold keyframes are gonna make your animation just hold until it hits the next keyframe. Rove keyframes aren't bound to a specific point in time, so they're just gonna try to smooth out your animation, the time in between them. We're not gonna be using these in this class, so don't worry about them. They're more specialty. Just keep them in the back of your mind. Let's go back to this example. Now, what if you're like me and you need things really simple because you have a tiny little pea brain floating around in your big water head? Well, I like to just kind of simplify everything. And I've made principles for myself. And I'm not talking about the Disney's 12 Principles of Animation, which is a really incredible resource, which you should also check out. I've made a much dumbed down version of my own principles that I like to use, which we can take a look at. I think that we can simplify most actions into just two keyframes, linear and eased keyframes. We can just think about. Linear is just 0%. It's perfect and beautiful. And then eased keyframes are just anything that's eased, any percentage above that. And don't ever use easy ease. Don't ever. It's also, the shortcut is F9, but it looks bad. Okay, I always like to use a percentage above this. And from here on, we're just going to be using the sliders in either motion or Duik to shortcut instead of using our velocity or easy ease. We're just going to use sliders now. So let's look at how we can simplify a lot of our actions here, a lot of our animation personalities. Now, here's how I've always remembered ease in and ease out. Ease in is like a car pulling into a garage. It eases in. Ease out is like a car pulling out of a garage. It starts out slow and then it speeds up. It eases out. Now from here, there's something else that we can deduce. When an object comes from off screen, it looks good for it to come full speed off screen and then slow down. When an object leaves screen, it looks good when it starts slow and hits its maximum speed once it exits screen. This idea almost always universally looks good. So an eased keyframe when it's on screen and a linear keyframe, which would be its maximum speed, when it exits screen. Check out these two examples that prove that I'm right. I only spent a few minutes looking online for examples of this in action, but it's everywhere. Objects leave screen fast and come on fast. This isn't anything groundbreaking, but it's true. Now let's try it out with this UFO. When this UFO takes off and then hovers, it's going to look right if both of these keyframes are eased, right? Start slow, and then it's still on screen hovering here, so this is eased. If either one of these keyframes wasn't eased, let's say this one on the ground, it looks jarring. Let me pull this out a little bit so you can get it from the beginning. you know, this could be a style you're looking for, but to me that looks weird. Let's reverse it and have this top one be uneased. That looks weird too. Now, what if we were to have this UFO go off screen here? If this UFO goes off screen, from our principle that we just learned, then this keyframe should get uneased. Because we are assuming that it's going to just keep flying like out of the atmosphere, right? So this is going to look right if this keyframe is uneased. See, that looks good because it's just going to keep like it's going faster and faster. Now, what if we ease this keyframe? This is probably going to look unnatural, like it's leaving screen and then slowing back down. See? That doesn't look right to me. Do you get where I'm going so far? Let's take a look at more ideas that we can break down into 2 keyframes. Here's a ball bounce. 2 keyframes. Technically it's 3, but come on, stick with me. The impact is a linear keyframe. It's hard, fast, and brash. And when it reaches up to its maximum height here, it slows down. An eased keyframe. Bounces and impacts, you can just remember that this is how they should look. When something is overshooting, since it's not hitting a surface, leaving a screen, etc., we'll just ease both keyframes. This would probably look natural. Now let's add another element to both of these ideas, the ball bounce and the overshoot. What if they were coming from off screen? How should it look? Well, for our ball bounce, when we know it comes from off screen, it's going to be a linear keyframe. And when it has an impact, another linear keyframe, and then the other keyframes will be eased, like this. Beautiful. What about if we add this extra dimension to our overshoot? What will that look like? When it comes from off screen, it's going to be fast and linear, but the other keyframes will be eased. Now let's take a look at one more little principle that I'm going to give you. When you're animating several properties at once, they tend to look good when you animate them together. So in this case, we're animating the position back and forth. Let's say I want to add in the rotation of this at the same time. Well, so I'm going to say, we'll animate this to the side here, and then it rotates again back here, and then back again. I probably want to keep these keyframes consistent because if I, let's say, keep these uneased and like move them off to the side here, it's probably going to look a little bit wonky. See, that looks weird and unnatural. If I ease them together with this, it's probably going to look good. That looks better. So once I have my animation blocked out, then of course I can go in and slightly offset things. You don't have to just be completely mathematical like a robot, but once you get things lined up properly, you should animate things together on beats and then go in and start to kind of offset things a little bit. And that's how you can get better looking timing. Okay, get it? Got it, good. Now let's take a look at the graph editor. So to a lot of people, the graph editor is a big, scary, daunting thing. Doesn't make a lot of sense. I'm going to try to help you out a little bit in the dumbest way possible. That's the only way I know to explain things is really dumb, but I think people kind of like that. I think that's probably why you bought the class. So right now, none of these keyframes are eased. Ignore this. This is a lie. I'm just reusing art because I'm a hack. Let's open up the graph editor here by clicking this. Now, when nothing is eased, we have a straight line across. Let me pull this up a bit. And we got these numbers on the side here. 0 to our highest amount, which is around 1,000 pixels per second. If I was to ease this here and open up the graph again, we can see this is going to dip down. What's happening is our speed is coming down to 0 pixels per second. It's easing in. The top here, it's 2,500 pixels per second, dipping down to 0. Great, and this is all on the position property, obviously. So from here, we can let's intentionally try to make an animation happen. Let's say instead of our car coming to a complete stop and then speeding back up again, we want this to like coast through here, slow down and idle through and then speed back up again and shoot through. Well, all we got to do is then pull these up a little bit off the 0, maybe to like here. And then we generally want to like kind of crank these handles out a bit to make it look a little bit smoother. Something that I like to always do is I like to pretend like there's a little snowboarder on my graphs. And I try to make shapes that would be good for a snowboarder to come down. So you want to avoid things like this, right? Because your snowboarder is going to hit this wall and they're going to die. And that's not going to be good. They're going to come down really fast and they're going to hit this and die. And then what is also literally is going to happen is your animation is going to suck because it's going to look like that. It's going to randomly speed up or something. So if you're making shapes that are really smooth and look like they would be really fun to snowboard on, your animations are going to look better. You want to make these kind of really sloping U's and W's like this, like these really nice mountains and peaks. And you know, this is a very simple animation, so it's easy to say that, but generally just kind of think about these. You want these shapes to be flowing into one another. And that's how you're going to get really smooth animations. So here we go. This is exactly what we wanted to do. Now, it's also important to note that we have different types of graphs down here. We have, right now we're on a speed graph. We also have a value graph. So in this case, we can see our X position is changing, which is horizontal. And we also have our Y position, which is obviously not changing because we have no vertical movement. And if you choose the reference graph, you can see both of these lined up together. We're mostly going to be dealing with the speed graph, so we only really want to worry about that. Let's get rid of that. Okay, so we're going to be taking a look at the graph editor more in depth in the class, so if this doesn't make sense, do not worry about it. Don't sweat it. Okay, so now we got the basics covered. It's time to move on.